This is Voicemail, the Universal Postal Union's podcast covering the wonderful world of mail. I'm your host, Ian Kerr. In this episode, we return our attention to Africa. Commissioner Dr. Armani Abou-Zeid, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission, joins us to talk about the post's crucial role in infrastructure and development. But before we get to the Commissioner, a date for the diary. The UPU will hold a voicemail exchange webinar on the 8th of March dedicated to women's leadership in the post. Join us at 2 p.m. Central European Time for this free webinar held via Zoom. We'll have some great panelists sharing some personal perspectives. So check the UPU website for registration details. Go to upu.int and follow the links. That's 8th of March, 2 p.m. Central European Time. Now let's get straight into our main interview. I'm joined by Commissioner Dr. Armani Abou-Zeid, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission. Commissioner, welcome to the UPU Voicemail podcast. Let's start with a question we ask all of our guests. What's your first memory of the post?
Ian, first, let me thank you for this podcast and congratulate Mr. Medouki for his election as Director General of the UPU. I was a very active user of the post. I remember my time, there was no emails, there was no internet connection. So people like me wrote snail mail, handwritten messages. And I was also in lots of pen clubs worldwide. So I used every day, the first thing I do after when I return from school is to count the number of letters that I've received that day. And usually they are in the tens. So, so much so that Egypt is a very large country. This is my country, and in each region of Egypt, there is a street called Nile Street. And someone once wrote my address as just my name, Nile Street, Egypt. And it reached me so much. So this is the level to which, the Egyptian Post was used to me receiving emails, sending and receiving email. Mail.
You're the head of the African Union Commission's Department of Infrastructure and Energy, whose mandate, amongst others, is to cover postal services on the continent. So could you please explain a bit more about what the department does for the postal sector and what its relationship is with the national posts and even the postal regulators?
First, as you probably know, or our lovely audience knows, the African Union is a political organization that has all African countries as members. So all 55 African countries are members of the African Union with one specific goal, that is to unite Africa and to integrate it into one that is, prosperous, competitive, and, to look after the well-being of Africans. And yes, I am one of commissioner, one of the, we are 8 elected members, so I'm one of them, and we are 50-50 women and men. And my portfolio has transport, air, road, maritime, railways, has also energy, and has digitalisation and postal services. And we see actually postal services as part of the transport, as part of the digital, as also needing energy. So postal service is very important to us on the continent for various reasons. We can talk about that. But our role at the African Union, and my role with the team, is to create this, harmonized policies, strategies for the continent, to create this, one regulation for a sector or one specification for a sector, and to develop programs and projects that help interconnect the continent and integrate the continent. So all our programs and projects have regional or transcontinental nature. and mobilize resources for all the work that we are doing. And most and foremost, of course, my personal role as well is to advocate for Africa's interest for in matters of infrastructure, energy, digitalization, and so on and so forth.
The growth of e-commerce seems to fit beautifully into that entire idea then. E-commerce being digital, e-commerce relying on the post, e-commerce even being cross-border. Is that sort of fit into what you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, if we have to talk about postal services now, it's so much different from what I said earlier in the show. This is not about delivering just parcels or my mail, important as it was, because it was the only way we would connect with each other and the only way we would connect with the outside world. But there is, in recent years, we have seen also lots of reforms, developments, rethinking of the role of postal services. And I did say that they are very important for us in Africa. Why? Because we have a post office almost in every village. And they know us by name. I gave you an example of myself living in a huge city of 20 million people in a country that has 100 million people, and they can just pinpoint and say she lives in that street, in that building. So what does it mean? It creates a fantastic network that we have to leverage and build on. And yes, e-commerce is one of the things, but also many financial services also to be extended to the various communities, knowing that only very little percentage of the African population is banked. So the post offices can play also the role of, a local bank. It can even provide internet connection to where there is no internet connection by having a hotspot, in a village, for instance. It can, e-commerce is a very important part to that as well, because now it's true we don't have mail, but we do have parcels to be delivered through for the e-commerce and the e-commerce service itself, the transactions. Add to that also e-government, because again we are digitalizing all the services, including government services. So all you need is just, if you need a document, a physical one, you can go to the post office and on the machine, just have it printed, and or have it registered or fill in the application. If you don't have a connection at home, you can do that, and you can have this the eGov services as well. And I'm having in mind when I'm talking to you, not only the ones in cities, I'm particularly focused on the ones in rural areas who do not have probably internet connections or who do not have access to certain services. So a post office would be and is playing this incredible role. And we're seeing countries thinking and rethinking the roles of their postal services in a variety of ways. Now, much more top-notch, digitalization with blockchain technology for financial services. It's a fantastic network, not just within a country, a village, a country, or a continent, but across the world. Because remember, also all these post offices are interconnected. So we already have a fantastic network that we should definitely leverage and use, and it's being done.
We've already talked about my next question. Actually, I was going to ask you about what you think are the main trends that are specific to African posts, especially given your perspective working in infrastructure and development across various continents. But perhaps I should ask you, what do you think are the challenges, any specific challenges that African postal operators are facing?
Remember, I did give you how we're seeing some of the postal services being transformed. But remember, most of Africa has no access to energy. More than half of the population in Africa do not even have access to energy. So for services such as the ones I just described to operate. Electrifying a post office is a starting point, and it is a challenge, and it's still a challenge on the continent. Same goes into internet connection, which only 30 or 40% of the continent is connected to the internet, and mostly in urban areas, not rural areas. So there are lots of challenges at that level, infrastructure level, and this is where we come in, and we have all the programs and projects that we're trying to do to help and with and develop postal services together with both the UPU, but also our African postal institution. So there is then the institutional reform itself, how to rethink your services, retrain your people. Capacity is an important part of that. So infrastructure, financial, the human element, and then the institutional element are still to evolve. Having said that, sometimes we get blessings hidden, behind curses or difficult times. So COVID has been in many ways, or at least in some sectors, particularly digital, a blessing, because it gave a fantastic boost to digitalization, to e-commerce. We've seen a 5-fold increase in e-commerce. So there is a rush now to rethink, and reform the postal services to cope also with this development, which is not temporary. Once you get used to a certain service that is done easier, that spares you some efforts, or it's more economical, you get used to it. You don't abandon it. So it's now this trend is here to stay and to increase. So with that, we are also pushing even more, using this COVID opportunity, I would say.
Let's talk about the role then African posts can play, or even could play, in the achievement of the African Union agenda. I think it's called Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. What could be done to enable posts to play a role in achieving these goals?
As I said, African Union purpose and role and goal is to integrate the continent. And here we are. We have a network already, and this network is operating and has been operating for decades. So this is fantastic. Now, the role of the postal service now is to cope with these new opportunities that are being presented to us, especially in the last 2 years, in order to advance the agenda, whether it's accelerate digital, or maybe help with the small and medium enterprises, which are key to our markets and to our people, but also or financial inclusion, because again, this is a pillar and of the work that we are doing. What we also are doing now, and within maybe 2 weeks, I hope this comes to fruition, is to help into that digital transformation approach to everything, but also to postal services, by providing a framework for data in Africa, by ensuring security of information. So when you get into the digital space, there are certain things that have to be there beyond the connection. And one important aspect is also the safety, security of people, of goods, of transactions. You need to know who's on the other side that you are talking to or transacting with. So a digital ID is important. Your data has to be secure at the African level. because we're trying to move from a national perspective or a national regulation to one that allows Africa also to work with each other. And central to that is the African free trade area. So we're saying e-commerce, but we have to look at the bigger picture. One of the pillars of the Agenda 2063 is the free trade area, which became effective last year. For the free trade area to work, we also need very active postal services that go hand in hand with the kind of massive transactions and work that go with under the free trade area.
Now, you mentioned security and trust. They're two hugely important things. And we in the postal sector like to think that we as the posts are trusted. And there are people out there bad people, let's say bad actors, who try to leverage that trust for illegitimate means, let's say. So your department also oversees the African Information Society and Cybersecurity projects. So do you work with the postal sector in these areas?
We work with all operators. Remember, this is a continental one. So it's not just about the postal services. The African Union has a convention on cybersecurity and personal data protection that is, we think it's now outdated, because it's been, 2014 is a long time in digital time. So we are updating and reviewing and updating this convention in order also to make it in line with trends, with threats, with opportunities that are out there. And we are also giving a special focus to child online safety and empowerment, because now our children are 24/7 on the internet. Yes, Post is definitely an important player in the African group, because and the partners group who work with us on cybersecurity and many other, aspects of digitalisation to ensure. So it's an important stakeholder, so as to go forward in a safe and secure manner.
Let's talk about climate. It's such an important and central part of what we're doing these days. So in November 2021, you spoke at one of the side events at COP26, discussing opportunities for the African green energy transition. So making a roadmap, shall we say, to achieving net zero emissions. So in your opinion, what's realistic and what's not? And what indeed is the time frame, especially when we talk about African Post?
Our climate agenda is a development agenda. Africa, as we speak, and that's our starting point, and we should not deter from. Our starting point is that there are 600 million Africans who do not have access to electricity. And I'm saying only electricity. I'm not saying even in the energy for industrialization or for transport or for this or that. We also have 900 million Africans who do not have access to clean and modern cooking facilities and are still, using either firewood or kerosene and whatever, and it's causing deaths, serious injuries, and diseases. So this is Africa's starting point. And our goal and mission is to make sure that access to affordable energy to all and clean cooking to all is there. Now, Africa has abundant sources of renewable energy and also has increasingly sources of natural gas. So what we are doing through African Union programs and also national programs is trying to harness this sources of energy towards that goal, knowing that what works to our advantage is that renewables, the prices became much more competitive than before. And as I said, they are also abundant on the continent. And there is an element that was added by COVID, which is energy security. So you want to make sure that the energy source that you have, or to the extent of possible, is present, is timely present, in your own country. Because we've seen under COVID, when the disruptions of the supply chains, you may not have, if you are importing fossil fuel, you may not have it. Because of this disruption. Whereas we have the sun, we have the hydro, we have geothermal and the wind, and so there are tremendous sources of renewable energy that Africa can harness, and also natural gas being the cleanest of fossil, especially for cooking. So that's also a very important aspect to us. So at the end of the day, Africa is a very small player when it comes to CO2 emission, 3 or 4%, but is the one that suffers most of climate disasters, and they became much more severe, much more frequent. And we are also conscious global citizens and want to make sure that we also play our role. And as I said, make sure that our primary target and goal is fulfilled.
Continuing this look forward, can you share some of the key projects that you and your partners are currently working on that will define the future for the African postal sector?
I know it sounds elementary, but it's not there. But the starting point is we want to make sure that each and every post office has electricity and has internet connection. And we work together with the postal services in Africa, the African institution and the global institution to for the capacity development of the people in the postal services. And there is a continuous dialogue and work to get into that together. For the whole Africa to get together into the postal, all the African postal service to get into that digital space, into that redefinition of role. It's a mammoth task, and with different speeds, different levels of development, because again, I said 55 countries. So you may see that certain countries are made it faster or are out there, others need more help. So again, this adds to the challenge from our side, because you really have to adopt almost 55 ways to get everybody on the same page. It is a challenge, but I am optimistic. And a few years ago, when we forged our digital transformation strategy, for which postal services were a pillar, some partners gave us the challenge that Africa will achieve it by the targets by 2030, and I challenged them. I said, no, we do it before. And I'm still hopeful that we do it before. And between you and me and the audience, COVID seems to have helped. So we're doing it faster than even originally planned. So stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Work like this involves multilateral dialogue, I suppose, with a number of different parties. You'd be talking with the postal operators themselves. You're talking with postal regulators and people like that. So how can you get them all on board, or what are the kinds of encouragement that you give to the regulators and the national regulators in each country, and so on and so forth?
Listen, it is so obvious that they are now rushing to do it. I used to advocate. Maybe if this conversation was taking place back in 2017, I may be talking to you about how difficult it is to convince. No, I don't need to do the convincing now. what they need to hear from me and from all of us to do together is how to do it. So it's not should we do it, it's how to do it. So we are focused on that, how to do it. So it's whether you're a regulator, whether you're even a central bank, because even we postal services, for the fact that we're talking also financial services, central banks are into that conversation, and we talk digital services, ICT ministers. So post now is everyone understood and is living the fact that it's central to this new post-COVID era, and that we are in the digital age. I mean, there is no going back, as I said. Our posts have to change, and they are changing to the better, or rethinking the role. Some maybe there will be some elements of paper mail, but it's how often now do I receive maybe I don't know, maybe a bank statement, and even that is now done by the apps, digital apps. So it's very rare, and I will be very surprised now. The same person who used to decades ago await those tens of letters when she comes home to get connected with the people, is the one who is now very surprised when she sees a paper mail waiting for her. I don't know, what is that? Why is it here?
Now, we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to ask you an important question, which is relating to the representation of women in the postal and logistics sector. So what's your advice? How can we increase the participation of women in the industry?
It's not just in this industry, but everywhere. But again, speaking particularly to this industry, I said that postal services role and definition is being rethought. So it's turning into a digital operator, sometimes financial operator, EDAV post, and there's tremendous opportunities for women to work in that, and it depends again where you are and in which country. But the traditional postman, even the name is a very male one. The traditional postman is not necessarily the image of postal services now. So there is tremendous opportunities for women, and I'm seeing them in our post offices. I'm seeing them, doing new things, and with civil registration in the post office. They're doing financial service in the post office. So there is an incredible, possibility for women now to do that into the postal services. But I would like also to report that in 2015, there was a joint study between UN Women and UPU that demonstrated the non-discriminatory nature of the post in the provision of financial services and the inclusiveness of the posts in that. So again, this is something that works definitely strongly for the post when it comes to women and girls. We live in difficult times, but the difficult times are also giving us fantastic opportunities. And we have to grasp these opportunities. We really have to move fast, because this is a pivotal time in world history and humanity history. So we really have to be up to that challenge, and especially here in Africa.
A message of hope at a pivotal time in history, and what more could we possibly ask for? Dr. Armani Abou-Zeid, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission, thank you very much for joining us on a UPU Voicemail podcast today.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank all the audience. And again, you've been very patient, and thank you for that. Enjoy this podcast very much.
You've been listening to Voicemail, the official podcast of the Universal Postal Union. Subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcast platform and you'll get each episode downloaded to the device of your choosing as it's released. My thanks to the team at the UPU for their help putting together this episode. I'm your host, Ian Kerr, and I look forward to your company next time on Voicemail, the podcast of the UPU.